You're watching NewsX and I'm Devika Chopra. For the first time since the 1985 Kanishka bombing, NewsX has accessed the Justice BN Kirpal report, which was submitted not just to the Indian government but also to Canada mere months after twin bombings killed over 300 innocent lives. There are shocking details of how this bombing in two parts of the world was carried out by Khalistani terrorists. Over the course of the next 1 hour, we will take you through all details of this 220-page Justice BN Kirpal report that has been exclusively accessed by NewsX. By the end of this telecast, you will understand the entire sequence of events, how they happened in 1985. I have with me Mr. Rishabh Gulati in the studio, our managing editor. Rishabh, over to you. Why don't you begin to explain to our viewers what is it that we found in the report?
Devika, thank you very much. March of 1986 was when a committee led by Justice BN Kirpal, who became a future Chief Justice of India, was released. The committee was tasked with the primary purpose of investigating the cause of why the Kanishka Flight 182 came down over the coast of Ireland. That was the term in reference of the committee. What brought down the plane? A 228-page report. A 228-page report was then eventually filed. In that 228-page report, there are some details which I'm going to go through with you and break it down. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the worst terrorist attack until 9/11 happened. Let me repeat to you, this was the worst terrorist attack until 9/11, which happened near 26 years later. The Canadian authorities ran such a botched up investigation that their future Prime Minister Stephen Harper had to come and publicly apologize that a 2010 Commission of Inquiry in Canada left it as ununderstandable why they were unable to prosecute no one. So the four main accused, of which you're going to hear details now, of what they did, how they did it, what they planted, how they planted it. Three of them simply walked away, were never convicted. One was convicted and he was out on bail 3 years later. Conviction in 2005. It took them 20 years to convict him. 3 years later, he was on bail, and by 2017, the Government of Canada, by Izzat Bari, back living in society. Now, we've gone through this in very quick time in the past 1 hour, the entire species of the report part by part, and let me now go through the exact basics. I know my camera person is struggling a little bit to get his focus right, so we're going to get that sorted for you so I can take it with you point by point. Okay, we're going to have to literally focus on the text over here. नहीं तो कुछ यहाँ पर कुछ दिखेगा नहीं. आप अपना focus check कर लीजिए. Okay, there we go. All right. Now fingers crossed. Let me start with the part of the communications between AI-182 en route Montreal-London and ATC. Two-way communication between the ill-fated aircraft and the ATS units of Canada and Ireland was maintained during the flight. From Montreal till the time of the crash, the communications were recorded on the ATC tapes. Transcripts of the relevant tapes were provided by the Canadian Aviation Safety Board and the Director of Air Traffic Services in Ireland. From the transcript of the conversation, it is observed that the two-way communication between AI-182 and the various ATS units was normal. The last RT contact with the aircraft was at 0709.58, that is 9 minutes past 7 in the morning, when AI-182 informed Shannon UAC that it was squawking 2005. The tape transcript also shows that the aircraft did not transmit any information regarding with Shannon USC regarding emergency or on the emergency frequency 131.15 megahertz on which it was last working with Shannon USC, or on the distress frequency 121.5 megahertz. Indecipherable noise was, however, found recorded on the Shannon ATC tape just at the time of the crash, that is at 14 minutes past 7. Thereafter, repeated calls were made by Shannon UAC to AI 182, but there was no response. The sum total of this, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm just taking you through the brief summary, is that AI Flight 182, roughly 5 hours into the journey, 190 kilometers from the coast of Ireland en route to London, did not report any issues, any mayday call, any concern, any fault. It simply vanished suddenly. So this is the summary of the communications. There was no fault in communication, nothing reported by the pilot until the bomb went off. And this, of course, tellingly now is the transcript of the flight voice recorder. We are beginning off at 0647. Roger. Shannon 1831. In flight level 330 available. Shannon flight level 330 available. FL 330. A couple of forms of Air India. What about those forms? Hanji, let me also introduce who's talking in all this before we take it further. There are 4 channel identifications. A is the area mic, B is the co-pilot channel, P is the pilot channel, and F is the flight engineer's channel. Through the course of it, maximum time is spent on the co-pilot channel. There are 5 people whose voices are recorded in the cockpit voice recorder. One is, of course, Captain Narendra, commander, Captain Binder, co-pilot, Mr. Dumasia, flight engineer, J. Dinshaw, who was the flight purser, and Sampath Lazar, who was the in-flight supervisor. This is, of course, the cabin crew. So there are 5 people whose voices are being recorded. So let me take you through one. Okay. Is flight level 330 available? Shannon, flight level 330 available. FL 330, a couple of forms of Air India. What about those forms? Hanji, और वो custom का form. बाद में, then the co-pilot says, Dinshaw responds, yes sir. Do me a small favor. What's that? एकदम end पे, 54 seat पे, a boy is sitting there. Inder Thakur knows him. He just wanted to have a look at the cockpit. Where is he? Inder knows about him. Okay, 54 seat. Can I send him now? After about 15-20 minutes. Okay. AI 182 is cleared to London via Upper Bravo 40 to Bunty. Take Upper Red 37 to Ibsley and maintain 310. This is Shannon ATC. Shannon ATC. AI 182 after Bunty, maintain the Upper Blue 40 to Murley and then Upper Red 37. The flight responds, right, Air Bunty to Murley and the Upper Red 37, AI 182. Shannon ATC says, AI 182, would you squawk 2005? I repeat 2005. AI 182 responds, right sir, squawking 2005, 182. Squawk. This is the last communication between AI 182 with ATC and Shannon. Everything is fine. The cockpit voice recorder, however, continues. This is taking place at, as was mentioned in the summary, at 9 minutes past 7 in the morning local time. Okay. Now, the flight date voice recorder continues recording the conversation that the pilots and co-pilots were having. हाँ भाई बुलाओ, कौन सा फॉर्म है? That's all right. Binder. The word Binder is coming from Dr. Dumasia, Dr. Dumasia, who's the flight engineer. He says Binder. Binder responds, Hanji. London operation को बोलना. Flight purser, they want about 30 custom seals. Custom seals, वो bar seal कराने के लिए. Flight purser, remember, is carrying alcohol on board the flight. They want that the custom seals be arranged for them in advance. This is the discussion they're doing because they're preparing obviously for landing in an hour or two from now. So the flight purser has told Dumasia, who's the flight engineer, Dumasia is informing the co-pilot that please tell customs that we want the custom seals कस्टम सील्स वो बार सील कराने के लिए. For their arrivals, customs bar, and that's it. While they're discussing in the middle of the conversation, the voice ends. Literally is saying, for their arrivals, the customs bar, finished. Now, as I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, there were 4 channels which were being recorded in the cockpit voice recorder. The area mic, the co-pilot's channel, the pilot's channel, and the flight engineer's channel. 4 channels, 5 voices identified. The last person who was speaking at the very end was caught on the area mic. It was most likely, the last voice that was recorded was most likely that of Mr. Dumasia, the flight engineer, talking about the custom seals, वो बार सील कराने के लिए, for their arrival, customs bar. Suddenly the voice ends. There is 5.4 seconds of recording time after the voices end. Just 5.4 seconds continues. And there is a sound mentioned here. So what is happening on board the aircraft is suddenly the voices have ended. The CDR, which is the cockpit digital recorder, the voice recorder, all fail simultaneously, and the aircraft disappears from the ATC radar all at the same time. All happens suddenly. There is an main electrical system which has failed, which is why the voice is stopped immediately. The backup electrical system lasted for 5.4 seconds after the first main electrical system failed. It shifted to the backup, and the backup lasted for 5.4 seconds. Here is what they found in the backup. Let me start with the cockpit voice recorder. Now what you're seeing over here is the frequency of the sound that was being recorded, which was the normal baseline frequency. You see a sudden spike for this period, and this is being measured in milliseconds. So it's roughly about 20 to 25 milliseconds. This is 0 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds. So roughly 20-25 milliseconds, you see these spikes. Okay? Take a note of this. Now let me do a comparative analysis. थोड़ा सा zoom out करिए तो दोनों पर्चे यहाँ से दिखाएं. Okay? So zoom out करिए. ऊपर उठाइए कैमरा. Okay? On the left side is the frequency of channel number 3. I mentioned 4 channels. So this is channel number 3. Focus. This is channel number 3. Okay? Right? So this is before. This is the normal frequency. This is when they are suspecting the explosion took place. You can clearly see the spike in pattern. Now the report and analysts say the spike in pattern would have been much greater, but because there is an automated dampening system which basically protects the pilot's ear from very sharp noise, very loud noise, in about 30 milliseconds the automated dampening system kicks in and it starts toning down the volume of some very loud noise. So that probably kicked in, otherwise they would have been much louder. Similarly, just before the gang, the time signal and frequency spectrum of the cam channel, right? This is what's happening before and this is what happens after. It almost goes off the chart. This is the point that the explosion is taking place. Here's another one. Okay. This is a comparison of Indian Airlines flight B37. Okay. And you can see the similar spikes that were found at a time the recording was taking place. Okay. So now this is giving you an analysis of what happened in the last few minutes of that flight. The captain, along with the co-pilot, the flight engineer, the flight purser, they were telling that there is a boy sitting on flight number 54, he wants to see the cockpit, उसको बुला लो. अच्छा यार, जब हम लैंड करेंगे वो बार सील करना पड़ेगा तो उसके कस्टम सील चाहिए, फ्लाइट पर्सन को 30 चाहिए, बुला लेना. Maximum conversation Captain Bhinder is doing. There's minimal intervention from Shannon ATC because the flight parameters are normal. And the last person who was recorded saying anything was the flight engineer, talking about a normal routine matter. In the next 2 or 3 seconds, they would be blown up with their bodies at 31,000 feet, going through hypoxia and decompression before a few seconds later they would hit the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. All right, so this takes part of the communications, Devika. Now let me go across to a very compelling part on what happened. Okay, remember there are about 329 people on board. कुछ पढ़ा नहीं जा रहा है. Okay, there are 329 people on board. 131 bodies had been recovered. None of the bodies of the flying crew were recovered. So the captain, the flight engineer and the co-pilot, their bodies were never recovered. That is Narinder, Bhinder and Dumasia. The bodies which were recovered presented 40% of the victims. The exact seating position of the passengers is not certain because they might have changed seats. On the information which is available, this is the breakup of how the seats were sitting. Basically, Zone A, Zone B, which was first class, and they had something called club class at that point of time. They were mostly empty. The upper deck was about half full. The economy seats were near full. So Zone D, which is economy, had 104 adults and 2 infants rather. Zone D had 84 adults and 1 infant and one infant. Zone E had 105 adults and 3 infants. There were 301 people on board plus 6 infants, of which 117 bodies were identified. Some of the bodies, of course, were beyond recognition. As I mentioned, the flight crew bodies were never recovered. Now, the post-mortem reports were examined by Dr. Hill. He submitted 2 reports being exhibited H1 and H2 on the kinds of injuries that were, and let me read that out to you. There were 30 children whose bodies were recovered and they showed less overall injury. Flail pattern injuries were exhibited by 8 bodies. 5 of these were in Zone E, 1 in Zone D, 2 in Zone C and one a crew member, which is part of the cabin crew. The significance of the flail injuries is that it indicates that the victims came out of the aircraft at altitude. I want you to think about it. You're probably taking a nap, reading a book, talking to someone. The flight crew member is probably serving someone, attending to some inquiry, and suddenly at 31,000 feet, at roughly the airspeed would be north of 500 kmph, ground speed north of 800 kmph. Suddenly you are in the open sky at 31,000 feet. It's freezing. And we have further indication from further inquiries that at least 3 people survived the fall, which means that they were alive falling from 31,000 feet all the way to the floor of the ocean. They died of drowning. Just imagine. There were 26 bodies that showed signs of hypoxia, lack of oxygen, including 12 children. So suddenly you're a child, you are in open air at 31,000 feet, there isn't enough oxygen. So your lungs are getting damaged. That's the first thing that's happening to you, is you're choking because of the lack of oxygen, and hypoxia has started damaging your lungs, scarring your lungs. 9 of these were in Zone C, 6 in Zone D and 11 in Zone E. There were 25 bodies showing signs of decompression. Decompression, ladies and gentlemen, happens when basically when we are at ground level, there is dissolved gases in your bloodstream. When suddenly the pressure which you are bearing in a aircraft, remember an aircraft's fuselage is pressurized, the cabin is pressurized. When suddenly you go from 1 atmosphere or point, I think they maintain it at 0.8 atmospheres. You go from 0.8 atmospheres to the atmospheric pressure at 31,000 feet, which is less than half that. Literally the dissolved gases in your blood start boiling off. And that is the symptomology of decompression. It also happens with divers. If you are diving very deep and surface very fast, you suffer from decompression sickness. 7 children showed signs of decompression, which means that the dissolved oxygen and nitrogen in their blood was just boiling off. They were evenly distributed throughout the zone, but with a tendency to be seated on the sides, particularly the right side. 12 bodies, 23 bodies showed evidence of receiving injuries from a vertical force. They tended to be older, seated to the rear of the aircraft. 11 were in zone E2, crew, and 1 unknown. 16 had little or no clothing, which means the sheer force of the wind, the G forces. You have you remember you are having a horizontal velocity of 500 kmph. Your vertical velocity is literally 9.8 kilometers per second square, which is the Earth's gravity. It's literally, as you are choking on oxygen, as your blood is boiling, your clothes are being ripped off as you're falling from the sky, literally just falling from the sky. "21 bodies were found with no clothing, including 3 children. There were 49 cases showing signs of impact style injuries, including 19 children. These are G-force injuries. These would of course happen when they hit the surface of the water. There is a general absence of signs indicating the wearing of seat belts. They weren't wearing seat belts. They weren't wearing seat belts because there was no problem. The seat belt sign probably wasn't on, because the pilots were discussing, यार उसको cockpit दिखा दो, बच्चा है cockpit देखना चाहता है, उसको बुला दो 54 seat से. That boy died a few minutes later. Maybe one of these bodies of the children that were recovered. In his testimony in court, Wing Commander I.R. Hill further stated that the significance of the flail injuries being suffered by some of the passengers was that indicated that the aircraft had broken in mid-air at altitude and that the victims had come out of the aeroplane at altitude. He further explained that if an explosion had occurred in the cargo hold, it was possible that the bodies may not show any sign of the explosion. Sign of the explosion means that there weren't burn injuries, scorch marks, shrapnel patterns. These were not found in the bodies. This is what happened to the victims of AI 182. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about who did it and how. Remember, it was not the remit of the Justice BN Kirpal Committee to discover who did it and how, but they have concluded some findings which are available to them. Let's begin at the beginning. Flight preparation. The flight from Toronto to Montreal was made up of the following: passengers originating from Toronto, transit passengers continuing their flight to Montreal, 2 diplomatic bags from the Indian Consulate General in Vancouver, a 5th pod engine. There was an Air India engine that required repair in India, so they were carrying an extra engine, and interline are transit passengers, and their baggage from connecting flights as before. 2 passengers were connecting from Saskatoon, 4 passengers were connecting from Edmonton, there were about 5 passengers connecting from Winnipeg, and 10 passengers connecting from Vancouver. 1 passenger by the name of M. Singh checked in at Vancouver on Canadian Pacific flight CP060 Vancouver to Toronto of 22nd June 1985 and got one piece of baggage interline to Air India flight 181. So he boarded the airline of Canadian Pacific and put 1 bag, interline means into transit, transferred to Air India flight 181, 182. 181 is in one direction, 182 is in the other direction. Even though he had no confirmed reservation on AI 181. This passenger, however, did not board the flight CP060. he didn't even board the flight at Vancouver of Canadian Pacific, at Vancouver. He also did not check in for Air India flight 181, 182 at Toronto. He booked a ticket, checked in a bag to a different airline's flight from Toronto to Montreal, after which he didn't board the first flight, didn't show up for the second flight, but his bag was not only boarded into the first flight, it carried on into the second flight. Believe it or not. Everything else was checked. The checking in of passengers for Air India flight 181 and 182 at Toronto began at 1830. The checking in of the passengers was carried out by Air Canada personnel who were at the handling agents for Air India and was supervised by Air India personnel. At about 1930, announcements were made for the primary security check of passengers. Door frame metal detectors, hand baggage was checked through X-ray machine. The passengers were also subjected to physical security check. Handheld metal detectors again. All of this checking happened except the baggage which had been interlined to this flight from the other flights. Everything was checked at security except for the transit baggage. The flight was closed for check-in at about 21:50. That's 10 to 10. There were 10 no-shows and 4 go-shows. 10 people who didn't show up at the airport and 4 people who didn't show up at the boarding gate. The security again checked the passengers. Remember these 10 people who did not show up at the airport. They had, this is 1985. Flight tickets from Canada to London, continuing on to India, are very expensive. 10 people simply did not show up to board the flight. 4 people showed up, took boarding passes, but did not come to the gate. 68 transit passengers had disembarked at Toronto. 65 of these passengers reboarded the aircraft as per transit cards. So 68 of them were supposed to transit. Only 65 of them actually reboarded the aircraft as per the transit cards. Now, they make an evidence that 2 or 3 transit passengers did not reboard the flight at Toronto, and that was not unusual. Some Toronto passengers traveling to India buy their tickets Montreal, India, Montreal instead of Toronto, India, Toronto because the fare is higher. So they go to bus to Montreal and then they board the flight. So this was, some passengers might have been doing this. These passengers sometimes inform Air India personnel at Toronto about their not reboarding the aircraft. On 22nd June 1985, however, no such passenger informed Air India personnel. Then there was a crew change. This was the lucky crew that got off at Toronto. The flight and cabin crew members who took over the flight AI-182 had been laid over in Toronto for the week prior to the accident flight and were scheduled to take the flight up to London, where they were to be relieved by yet another set of crew. Captain H.S. Narendra was the commander, with Captain S.S. Binder co-pilot, D.D. Dumasia flight engineer. In addition, there were 19 cabin crew members. All the crew members reported together at the airport at 21:30. As per the practice existing at the time, the flight crew and their cabin crew members were not subjected to frisking checks and their hand baggage was not security checked. Their checked-in baggage was, however, security checked along with the other checked-in baggage of passengers. The interline baggage was brought to the international baggage makeup area by the Air Canada staff, but as mentioned earlier, it was not personally identified and matched with the passengers. So there was a Mr. M. Singh who never took the flight from Vancouver to Toronto, who was not there at the airport to board the flight in Toronto, but his baggage. And I'm going to come to how he got his baggage on board. The checked-in baggage of the originating passengers and crew members of AI-182 was sent on a conveyor belt to the baggage makeup area. At the checked-in baggage along with the interline baggage was required to be security checked on the X-ray machine, which was located in the baggage makeup area at the end of international belt number 4. Then the X-ray machine was working intermittently. It broke down and there was no picture on the screen. The machine could not be repaired on that day as it was a weekend and no technician could be contacted. Yeah, this happened. This happened at a Canadian airport. Well, A few envelopes containing some flight documents addressed to the Accounts Office of Air India. So they were carrying their own office documents. On 8th June, the number one engine, and just to get you context, of Air India Boeing 747 aircraft VTEGC had failed. So they were carrying the spare parts of this engine. Because of that, the pallets of these of this engine, which had to go to Bombay for repair, this took extra time, and the accounted for a delay in the loading of the cowlings. The departure of the flight was delayed by 1 hour and 25 minutes. So the bombers would not have known and could not have accounted for this kind of flight delay, because they would have timed the flight to blow up exactly at the halfway mark between Montreal and London. It is because they didn't account for this 1.5 hours that it blew up very close to the, or rather 190 kilometers from the Irish coast. Senior flight dispatcher Air India Toronto did the flight dispatch of AI-182 for sectors Toronto, Montreal, London. He briefed the flight crew members of the flight plan, weather, air traffic control and fuel requirements. The flight plans for the sectors Toronto, Montreal, London were duly accepted and signed off by the commander. At 16 parts midnight on the 23rd of June 1985, the maintenance manager, security officer and passenger supervisor travelled on board. In all, there were 270 passengers on board in addition to 22 crew members. The route from Toronto to Montreal flight was uneventful. The aircraft landed in Montreal at 10 minutes past 1 a.m. No snag was reported by the flight crew. The aircraft was parked at Cluster 1 Bay number 114. 65 passengers destined to Montreal along with the 3 Air India personnel mentioned above deplaned at Montreal. The remaining 202 passengers who had joined the flight at Toronto remained on board the aircraft as transit passengers were not allowed to disembark at Montreal. Baggage handlers offloaded 3 containers of baggage, 1 valuables container and 4 cargo containers from the aircraft. Then they did a flight inspection. Other than a rare latch handle on the 5th pod engine, which had to be sealed up, everything was fine. There was 104,000 kilograms of fuel, which was good for 8 hours and 40 minutes of flying time. The pilot signed the certificate of acceptance as commander. They were ready to go. No other cargoes is accepted for this flight except a small package weighing less than 1 kilogram containing medicines for a cancer treatment of a patient in New Delhi. This parcel was received at 3:30 on the 21st of June and was loaded in container 14R by Messrs. Mega International on the 22nd of June, more than 24 hours after its receipt. 5 baggage containers, 1 valuables container and 2 empty containers were loaded in the aircraft. The checked-in passengers with their hand baggage went to the departure sterile area, and they once again went through metal detectors, hand baggage check, X-ray units. At 1 a.m. on 23rd June, after the primary security check was completed, the passengers proceeded to boarding gate number 80, and again their hand baggage was checked, which means that the likelihood of one of the passengers on board having this problem or carrying something in the hand baggage was very low. A total of 105 passengers boarded flight AI-182 at Mirabel Airport, this is Montreal. It was determined that all passengers who had checked in boarded the aircraft. There was no interline passenger. At Montreal, there were 5 no-shows and 2 go-shows. So at Montreal also 5 people didn't show up for the flight. In all, 307 passengers were on board the aircraft. The flight plan and the load trim sheet, however, indicated 303, as 4 of the 6 infants were not included in the passenger list because their age would have been less than 6 months. This is the breakup of the seating, which I've already gone through. Now, the 3 suspected suitcases were not loaded on the aircraft and were detained in the baggage makeup room. So, there were in fact 3 pieces of baggage of transit passengers who had not showed up, whose baggages were removed. After the names of the persons to whom the suitcases had belonged had been identified, the same were transferred to the decompression chamber of EAA-1 airline, where they were examined with the aid of the police explosives dog with negative results. The suitcases were kept overnight in the said chamber, and they were opened. It was found that they contained no explosive items. So the suitcases were taken. No unclaimed baggage pertaining to Air India flight was recovered either at Toronto or at Mirabel or Montreal. The aircraft took off from Montreal at 18 minutes past 2 in the morning. Its estimated time of arrival in London was 33 minutes past 8 in the morning. The CVR and the ATC tape showed that the flight was normal, uneventful. Suddenly at about 07:14, 14 minutes past 7 a.m., when the flight was being monitored by air traffic control at Shannon with the help of secondary surveillance radar, the aircraft disappeared from the radar scope. Subsequently, the ATC at Shannon got to know about the aircraft, had met with the accident, and its wreckage was sighted off the coast of Cork. Now, I just want you to focus on this for just a quick second on the boarding of this aircraft, because we are going to examine the one particular person, Mr. Singh, the one broken X-ray machine which was not working, and the transit passengers, some of them who bought tickets did not show up for any of the flights. So make a note of this. One passenger by the name of M. Singh checked in at Vancouver on Canadian Pacific flight CP060 on 22nd June, got one piece of his baggage interlined to Air India flight 182. He had no reservation. This passenger did not board the flight CP060 and did not check in for Air India flight 182 at Toronto. Now, the conclusions of the report. It is undisputed and there is ample evidence on the record to prove that Air India's Kanishka had a normal and uneventful flight out of Montreal. The aircraft had been in air for about 5 hours and was cruising smoothly at an altitude of 31,000 feet. The readout from the CVR shows that there was no emergency on board till the catastrophic event occurred. This is corroborated by the printout available from the DFDR. The event occurred at approximately 0714 and that brought the aircraft down, and it probably hit the surface of the sea within a distance of 5 miles. The time within which the plane came down at such a steep angle could not have been more than a very few minutes. There was a sudden snapping of the communication between the aircraft and the ground. The aircraft has also suddenly disappeared from the radar. It is evident that the event had occurred at 31,000 feet, which had brought down Kanishka. What could possibly have happened to it? The aircraft was apparently incapacitated, and this was due either to it having been hit from outside, or due to some structural failure, or due to the detonation of an explosive device within the aircraft. Evidence indicates that after the event had occurred, though the pilots did not or were not in a position to communicate with the ground, they nevertheless appeared to have taken some action. According to Mr. Laflamme, witness number 12, the examination of the wreckage showed that the spoilers had been deployed, and this must have been done with a view to enter into an emergency descent. He has further speculated that such an emergency descent would support or perhaps cause a rupture in the forward area or a partial damage to the hydraulic system or damage to the control system, which created such a condition that the pilots were not able to control the flight. The wreckage further showed that the jack screw for the stabilizer trim was found in the nose up position, and it was hard to explain how this got there merely as a result of impact with the water. The trim being in that position could only have happened due to the pilot selecting it or as a result of a situation created by an explosion. In that position and at a high aircraft speed, there would have been an extremely high G loading on the aircraft. It can further be speculated that if an explosion takes place in the forward cargo compartment, the oxygen stream might have been damaged, so that when the pilots donned their mask as part of their emergency drill for explosive decompression, they were not breathing enriched oxygen, and the time of useful consciousness at about 31,000 feet would be significantly less than 30 seconds under high stress, and if the pilots became unconscious as a result of this, then the aircraft would have gotten out of control, which would explain subsequent events. None of these participants have produced any evidence which could lead to one of the conclusions, that there was an external hit. So missile strike on the aircraft is being ruled out. Thus, we are left with only two of the possibilities: structural failure or accident having been caused due to bomb having been placed inside the aircraft. After going through the entire record, we find that there is circumstantial as well as direct evidence which directly points to the cause of the accident as being an explosion of a bomb in the forward cargo hold of the aircraft. At the same time, there is complete lack of evidence to indicate that there was any structural failure. On the 23rd of June 1985, there was an explosion at the Narita airport. The explosion occurred when a bomb exploded in a suitcase which was to be interlined to Air India's flight number 301 from Tokyo to Bangkok. The following events, which had occurred prior to the explosion, clearly established the connection between the two incidents. And this is compelling. On the 19th of June 1985, at approximately 1800 hours, a CP Air, Canadian Pacific Air reservations agent in Vancouver, received a telephone call from a male with a slight Indian accent. He identified himself as Mr. Singh and informed the agent that he was making bookings for two different males, also with the surname of Singh. One booking was made in the name of Jaswant Singh with CP086 from Vancouver to Dorval on 22nd June to link with AI 182 departing from Mirabel. The other booking was made to Bangkok. Using CP003 from Vancouver to Tokyo and then AI 301 from Tokyo to Bangkok. So, two bookings are made, one coming from Vancouver to Montreal and Montreal going through Toronto to London and then subsequently to India, and then one going to Bangkok from Tokyo, but the flight was originating in Vancouver. Now, the booking was made in the name of Mohinder Bal Singh. A local telephone contact number was given and the call lasted about 30 minutes they spoke. At the same time, approximately 20 past 7, another reservation. Okay. So, at 6 o'clock, the first reservation is made for the flight going to London. Then another reservation is made for a flight going through Bangkok through Tokyo, but an Air India flight going from Tokyo to Bangkok. At the same date, on approximately 1920, another reservations agent from CP Air was contacted and requested to change the booking for Jaswant Singh. The confirmed flight on CP086 was cancelled and a reservation was made on flight CP060 from Vancouver to Toronto, and a request to be waitlisted on AI 182 from Toronto to Delhi was made. Make a note on this, waitlisted, no confirmed ticket available. On 20th June 1985 at about 10 past 12, a male appearing to be of Indian origin purchased the tickets with cash from Canadian Pacific Air Ticket Office in Vancouver. The booking in the name of Mohinder Bal Singh was changed to L Singh. They changed the name. And the booking using the name of Jaswant Singh was changed to M Singh. The telephone contact number was also changed. Also changed the telephone number. Now they are trying to change the names, change the contact details. The final itinerary was as follows. Mr. M Singh was to board CP06 Vancouver to Toronto, was confirmed. Then AI 181 Toronto Montreal, waitlisted. AI 182 Montreal Delhi, waitlisted. Did not have confirmed tickets. Mr. L Singh, CP003 Vancouver Tokyo, confirmed. Scheduled to depart to Vancouver, then board Air India 301 to Tokyo, Bangkok, confirmed flight, confirmed flight. On 22nd June 1985 at about 6:30 am, a caller identifying himself as Mr. Manjeet Singh, M Singh, called the CP Air reservations office. Yet again, this is the fourth call. The caller spoke with a heavy Indian accent and wanted to know if his bookings on AI 182 was confirmed. The caller was informed by the agent that it was still waitlisted out of Toronto and offered to make alternative arrangements to Delhi. The caller stated that he would rather go to the airport and take his chances. The caller also asked if he could send his luggage from Vancouver to Delhi and was told that he could not check in his baggage past Toronto until his flight was confirmed. Then, ladies and gentlemen, something stupendously miraculous happened. I'm going to come to that. On Saturday morning of 22nd June, a CP Air passenger agent working the check-in position number 26 at the CP Air ticket counter, Vancouver International Airport, recalls dealing with a passenger of Indian origin booked on CP060 and then on to Delhi. The passenger stated that he wanted his bag tagged right to Delhi from Vancouver. After checking the computer, the agent explained that since he was not confirmed past Toronto, his baggage could not be interlined. The passenger insisted, and as the line was long, because there was a crowd, there was a long line which you can't see because of the bad focus of the camera. Because the line was long, the agent relented and let his baggage be sent on to the next flight to Delhi via London. The flight manifest for CP060 shows that M. Singh checked in through this passenger agent, was assigned the seat 10B and checked in one piece of baggage. Okay, this is how they are planting the bomb. The flight manifest for CP003 shows that on the same day, the person using the name L. Singh with an interline ticket to Bangkok also checked in through the same counter and was assigned seat 38H. He also checked in one piece of baggage, just one baggage. You're flying from Vancouver to Delhi carrying one piece of luggage. You're flying from Vancouver to Bangkok via Tokyo carrying one piece of luggage. One person doesn't even have a confirmed seat, but because he's done drama and the checking agent is worried because there's a crowd and she's in a hurry, she says, okay, I'll put your bag even though you don't have a confirmed ticket. Unbelievable. A check of CP Air's records and interviews with passengers on flight CP003 and CP060 indicate that the persons identifying themselves as Mr. M. Singh and L. Singh did not board these respective flights. In a statement, William Long annexed to the affidavit of IG Pol, he has stated that on 22nd June 1985, he was employed as a driver whose responsibility was to deliver interline baggage between Terminal 2 to Terminal 1 and vice versa at Toronto. He has further stated that he had picked up 4 bags from Terminal 1, which were destined for Terminal 2 Air India. 3 of these bags were from the US, originating from New York. Regarding the last bag, and this is his testimony as follows. The 4th bag destined for Air India was, I distinctly remember looking at the baggage tag, and it was pink with the CP logo in blue. So a pink baggage tag with a blue logo saying CP on it. There were also numbers, but I can't remember the numbers, from CP Air. And I remember it was from Vancouver. On the bottom of the tag, it said Vancouver using the initials YVR and the flight number, which I can't remember. The bag was destined for India. When I arrived at the CP Air belt, there was a number of bags from other airlines on the belt included. In these were 3 US air bags destined for Air India. As I was finishing loading the carts, a CP Air station attendant who had been unloading bags from the containers, I noticed as I checked once more for any more bags, drop another bag on the conveyor belt. This was the bag destined for Air India. It was a dark brown Samsonite hard-sided type 01A on the baggage identification chart. After they were loaded onto the cart, I took them over to Air Canada domestic belt at gate 8991. Ladies and gentlemen, now this is what happened, and let's end the telecast here. There are 2 flights going, Vancouver Tokyo, Vancouver Toronto. The Vancouver Tokyo flight connects from Tokyo to Air India 301 to Bangkok. The Vancouver Toronto flight connects to Air India 182 Emperor Kanishka. One flight is going west to Japan, the other flight is going east via London. A male called CP Air Reservations in Vancouver. He books a one-way ticket on CP060 to Toronto with connections to Air India 182 under the name of Jaswant Singh. A return ticket was booked to Tokyo connecting with Air India flight 301 to Bangkok and then the name of Mohinder Bal Singh. Then this is happening at 1 in the morning, which is GMT. At 7 p.m. GMT, a male attended the CP air ticket office. He paid $3,500 in 1985 in cash. He paid $3,005 in 1985 in cash. I want you to think what 3,005 Canadian dollars sounds like today and think about what kind of money it was in 1985. A lot of money. He paid in cash for the above tickets after changing the name of Mohinder Bal Singh to L Singh and changing from a return ticket to a one-way ticket. They decided to be cheap also last minute. Then what's the point of having a return ticket? Let's just do a one-way ticket, no? And he changed the name Jaswant Singh to M Singh. Then on Saturday, another Mr. Singh calls the reservation office. He confirms his ticket to Toronto. He demands his luggage be sent to India. This Mr. M. Singh then checks in, he gets seat 10B. He wanted the suitcase interlined to AI 182. The agent relents and lets him do it. CP 060 departs, Vancouver 18 minutes late. M. Singh is not in the assigned seat. Simultaneously, this is at 4 o'clock GMT. Simultaneously, L. Singh is checking in for CP 003. One suitcase interlined to Air India 301. Assigned seat is 38H. Simultaneously, CPA 060 arrives in Toronto 12 minutes late. Some passengers and baggage are interlined to AI Flight 181, which of course became Flight 182. Meanwhile, Mr. L. Singh, CPA 003 departs 17 minutes late for Tokyo. L. Singh is not in his assigned seat. Meanwhile, on the other side, Air India Flight 181 departs from Toronto for Mirabel in Montreal. It's running 1 hour 40 minutes late, as I've already mentioned. It arrives in Montreal at Mirabel at 1 in the morning. Air India Flight 182 departs from Mirabel 1 hour 38 minutes late. It departs at 18 minutes past 2 in the morning. Simultaneously, 3 hours later, CP003 arrives at Narita Airport in Tokyo. It's arriving 14 minutes early. Baggage cart explodes in transit roughly about 30 to 40 minutes later. 2 baggage handlers are killed and 4 are injured. This is happening in Japan, on the other side of the world. This happens at 19 minutes past 6 in the morning. At 14 minutes past 7 in the morning, Air India Flight 182 disappears from radar. The time difference between the bomb going off in Narita and the bomb going off on flight AI 182 Emperor Kanishka, the time difference, ladies and gentlemen, was 55 minutes. All of this is heavily recorded in the Justice BN Kirpal report. Devika, I'll leave it to conclude.
Absolutely, Rishabh. Over the course, of course, of the next few days, we will go over further and further details of what led to the Kanishka bombing, how Canadian intelligence completely failed not only its own citizens but others who were on board the aircraft.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.